In an industry that prizes security and precision, the culture of self-preservation over exploration has become a dangerous default. The real risk is in avoiding risk and not taking action. We'll explore how a culture of blame rather than risk aversion itself drives stagnation in the financial industry. And we'll discuss why pointing fingers when things do go wrong only intensifies fear of failure and stifles innovation.
You're listening to the Banking on Digital Growth podcast.
Welcome back to the Banking on Digital Growth podcast. I'm Audrey Cannata, operations lead here at the Digital Growth Institute. And joining us for today's conversation is founder and CEO, James Robert Lay.
Hello, Audrey.
Hello, James Robert. Excited to be talking risk today, which is a subject that you and I probably differ quite a bit with.
Why is that? Because I know you are more inclined to be
risk averse,
which is more in line with those who watch and listen to this podcast. And so you have a lot of natural empathy to the risk adverse mind. On the other side of the spectrum, I've been an entrepreneur for 22 years and have lived in a world of risk.
Yep.
And it has created tension. It has created conflict. And specifically this year, probably more than ever so before. And I know we're going to get into that. But what are you seeing when it comes to risk, and why risk or risk aversion could be more risky in a time of exponential change, particularly when it comes to the activity and the function around marketing and sales and growth? Because it's like I still see a lot of institutions operating thinking like it's 1999, but that's not the case.
I don't know. I think, and I don't know how much of this is cultural. I don't know if, possibly industry specific, but it seems as though there are quite a few people that we've spoken to who their fear of being wrong and making a mistake and having, a failure, that fear is greater than their desire to grow and to level up. So they're operating from a place of let's play it safe versus let's take action, let's make change, let's see how we can be even better. We might fail, we might make a mistake, and that's okay. But we're going to keep leveling up and keep moving the needle forward. So I think that fear might be overpowering the desire to move forward. And I can empathize with that for sure. That's a lot of how I naturally operate just in my Colby alone.
Well, I mean, have you been in a situation or an organization? I mean, you were a teacher for 7 years before this. How much does risk aversion, or how much did risk aversion play into, just, we'll call it, the culture of teaching? Because I think of teaching, I think of education at the macro level. Education is very institutionalized.
Well, there is a lot of I don't know if politics is the right word, but as a teacher, and also depending on what you're teaching, but I mean, there's a lot of like documentation and proof and measures that you have to take and be able to prove. And you've got to be able to be in the hot seat and defend your teaching and grades and behavior. So there is a lot of like CYA happening, covering your ass.
Right.
And that's something that I know a lot of teachers, when I worked, were very cautious of. Like, you better make sure that you have all your paperwork and your documentation. So that fear stifled a lot of the creative thinking and the lesson planning and the ideas, because there was so much concern of getting in trouble. We were scared to get in trouble. I mean, we really were.
That is so interesting, because I was recently speaking at an event and we were talking about the perspective between where things were in 1994 to where things are now in 2024, and all of the changes that have transpired because of technology. And I made a comment, and it was like kind of just a side remark about being in high school in the 90s versus being in high school today, because a lot of, and my son, he's a freshman, and there's a lot of fear around, and even risk aversion around, like the use of AI in school. Um,
Mhm.
a lot of educators look at I think today through the lens of, well, that's cheating. Kids are cheating if they're using AI in their schoolwork. They're cheating if they're using AI to write a paper. And that came up because there's an individual in the audience that had raised their hand, and I'd called on them, and we had a little bit of a dialogue. I was on stage, and they said, yeah, absolutely. And she was actually an educator herself. So, and she's now working in content. But she
Oh,
said that the belief that she had around using AI, but also her team, they've had to reframe their belief around using AI in the content production process, because a lot of the team members felt that by using AI, they were cheating. And I was like, huh. So in 1999, 2000, I was a junior, senior in high school, TI 82s.
hmm.
I was like, well, is using AI in that manner, is that cheating? Just like for me using a TI 82 back in 1999, 2000 in my math classes, figuring out a way how to program the calculator and put notes in the calculator for test, that even
That would
when,
be cheating.
but see, but that's an interesting perspective, because you're coming at this from an
I'm actually
educator.
impressed that you could figure that out because could never figure out how to work one of those stupid calculators.
But is it cheating? And once again, because we're looking at this from two different lenses. I'm
We're
looking at
smart enough to figure it out.
I'm looking at
So
this from, there's a problem, like I have to take a test. I have a tool, I have a calculator. I'm able to use that tool and figure out a way to put formulas and notes in the calculator so that even when the calculator is cleared, it will maintain the memory of those notes. That was a different way of thinking about the problem. And I think that's how a lot of entrepreneurial minds are built. At the same time, there was inherent risk to that, right?
but you probably got adrenaline out of that. You're living for it.
And because she was an educator, you're an educator, and I think it's a matter of perspective. There are probably a
Absolutely.
lot of people who watch and listen to this, so they're like, dude was cheating. And I'm like, is that any different now than using AI as a shortcut to accelerate time? Because there's a lot of risk around the AI perspective. And I think we
Yeah.
have to be very cautious too. We don't want to put PII in there, personal information, and, you know, are we using open AI? Are we using a closed AI model when it comes to training the large language data sets? But how we're looking at the world through these two different lenses of risk
Yeah.
aversion.
Yeah.
Think
Yeah.
this is a very practical example here.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is. It's two different mindsets, and one's not right or wrong. I mean, there is no right or wrong here. It's just a perception. It is a mindset. But also there are going to be effects or consequences of whatever mindset it is that you choose. And so if you do choose to be more risk averse, if you are more concerned about, you wake up in the morning and think, how can I not get fired? How can I keep my job versus how can I level up? How can I be even better? Each one of those decisions that you make are going to have consequences. You choose to be more risk averse and play it safe, keep your job, great, but you're going to risk complacency, stagnation, other people passing you up, other organizations while you're not. So you just have to weigh the options yourself, but also be aware. I think that's part of this whole conversation and why we're having it is to bring awareness.
That idea of waking up and what can I do today to not get fired? For me personally, it's very hard to understand because as an entrepreneur, and someone brought this to my attention, you and I have had this conversation. It's like, they're like, James Robert, you're an entrepreneur. You wake up and you're like, what problems can I solve? How can I help? How can I create value for the world? But this individual works in banking. They're like, it's not how a lot of bankers think. It's not how a lot of credit union leaders think. They wake up and it's like, what do I have to do today to not get fired? At the same
And
time,
again,
though, I think, go ahead.
I was just going to point out, a lot of this is due to the industry because we've seen some catastrophic events in the industry that has been scary, that has been concerning. How much is that playing into this? Or is it carrying over into more of these activities that really aren't that risky?
Well, let's take marketing and sales. Like, let's just look
Exactly
at
what I'm saying.
right. Let's just look at that micro component because I think everything has to be viewed through a specific lens. So let's look at this from a marketing and sales perspective. There's a lot of risk today in not secret shopping your website. Why? Because there's a lot of risk in not knowing where you have blind spots in your customer journey. There's more risk in not knowing than there are in knowing. But once again, as we have done in our study for Q4, we found that around 85, 86% of financial brands still have not mapped out customer journeys, still have not secret shopped websites, and as a result, still are assuming a tremendous amount of risk by not knowing where they have blind spots and gaps in their customer journeys, causing them to lose loans and deposits. That's risk.
It is to the bigger picture and to the bottom line. And we understand that. We know that. But is it possible that some of these leaders are thinking, well, this is risky to find out? Because when we find out how much money we've been losing because of our marketing and sales, strategies, now am I on the chopping block now? Is this a reflection of me?
Okay, so now you're getting into the deeper issue, which I think is cultural within an organization. And the perhaps, and this is something that Stuart Cook recently shared on LinkedIn, is risk aversion isn't the enemy. He says that blame is the enemy.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like, if we do go in and we do secret shop a website and we do begin surfacing where there are gaps and blind spots, am I going to lose my job? Maybe it's better for me not to know these things.
Mhm.
Case in point, we recently did a secret shopping delivery for an organization. We identified where they had gaps and blind spots, not necessarily in the website and the digital journey, but specifically when it came to the connection between the digital journey and the contact center, the inbound call. And you and I handled this with kid gloves. Like, we were very cautious of how to deliver this news.
Right.
But let's put that to the side because I felt like the conversation got a little bit uncomfortable during that period. I do recall, though, when we were talking about identifying gaps and blind spots in the digital journey, there was an individual who got a little defensive in the delivery, which it's interesting now. If I think back to 1,300 plus deliveries, that level of defensiveness is not something that I often see, which is a positive. I think a lot of people, when we deliver website secret shopping studies, it's not defensive, it's more of deflated, is how I tend to see the delivery. But I'm like, no, 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 no. This is as bad as it's going to get.
I was going to say, it's only up from here, though.
We're only going to go up from here. Now you know. Now you have awareness.
Yeah.
Now we can accept where we're at. We can take action and we can hold you accountable that you can move forward. And that simple reframe really makes people feel better because I think you're right. This culture of blame and finger pointing, I think that's where a lot of risk aversion and not taking action comes from. What do I have to do today and I get fired? Well, I'm not going to secret shop my website because it's going to show me where the gaps and the blind spots are. And guess what? That's my responsibility. So better not to know those things. I disagree. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the conversation with Audrey, but I wanted to take a quick minute to tell you about the 2025 Digital Growth Accelerator program that we have exclusively for growth minded financial brand marketing, sales, and leadership teams who want to thrive and not just survive in 2025 and beyond. Now, if this sounds like you, text me right now, 832 549 5792. Let's have a quick conversation. That's because when you join the Digital Growth Accelerator program, you and your team are going to get access to a customer journey assessment along with a website secret shopping study that shows you exactly where you have blind spots in your customer journey, costing you millions of dollars in loans and deposits right now. You're also going to get access to all 12 classes in the Digital Growth University so that together with your team, you can develop a strategic growth blueprint that guides you forward along your journey of growth. And then finally, you're going to get ongoing learning and development through quarterly customer journey masterclass workshops that show you exactly what you need to do next to eliminate common customer journey blind spots so that you can level up your loan and deposit growth every 90 days. Even better, you can join right now, 100% risk-free. There's no risk to join the Digital Growth Accelerator. That means because you can have your money back, that by the end of 2025, if you don't get at least a dozen new ideas that will build your brand, that will help you eliminate customer journey blind spots, you get your money back. Put it another way, what are you risking by not joining the Digital Growth Accelerator? How many more loans and deposits are you going to risk losing because you probably have unseen gaps? You have unseen blind spots in your customer journeys right now that you're just simply not aware of. And it's not your fault. It's no one's fault. It's just we just don't know. We don't know. Here's the best part. When you take action, when you apply what you learn in the Digital Growth Accelerator, you're going to make your investment back. You're going to make the investment back that you're making in yourself. You're going to make the investment back that you're making in your team when you acquire just 3 to 5 new accounts. So if you're ready to thrive and not just survive in 2025, text me right now, 832 549 5792. Let's have a quick conversation and let's get back to the conversation with Audrey.
We talked on this podcast not too long ago about the group that we worked with on a secret shopping study, and they were picking their competitors. And I mean, they wanted to go up against the best of the best. They were like, bring it on, show me. Like, why would we not want to benchmark and compare ourselves against the best? Like, we're here for it. Granted, though, and this is something also interesting, this marketing group that we talked to, they were pretty new to the organization and they weren't responsible for their current site. They kind of they adopted their current site when they
Yes.
came in. So they were more open to it. But, they weren't taking anything personally because they didn't build it. So there's that fresh perspective. I can understand if it's, this is your website and this is your baby.
I think that right there, not taking things personally, is so critically important to get beyond the blame and the finger pointing. You know what? Point a finger at me. If you want, if like for example, if you're working within a financial brand and you know someone wants to get upset, point the finger at me. If we're doing like a website secret shopping, deflect it to me. Deflect it to the Digital Growth Institute. Don't don't take things personally because a lot of times it's personal because we've associated some level of identity, like our own personal value, to the role or the function of what we do, and we fell
Well,
short, and so we're going to take that personally.
yeah, I think that's, I mean, that is so there's two ways to look at it. For one, we can look at the person who is, placing blame. Is there someone in the organization who has created this culture where people are fearful to where they know that they're going to get blamed? Well, so that is a problem in and of itself to address. And in some cases, the only way to address it is to step away from that organization. Um, on the other hand, accepting blame for a situation is also something that needs to be addressed. You can be blamed, but that does not mean that you have to accept the blame. And
That's
this is
true.
about not taking it personally. Um, and that's hard. That takes a lot of discipline and like self-restraint, and talk about stoicism. Um,
Yes.
you want to point the finger at me? You don't have to accept that though. And I'm not saying cause a stir or a fight, but you don't have to let it bother you.
But I'm going to put myself out right here. I used to care a lot to the point of paralysis about what people would think about me.
Same. Still working on it.
I could give two shits because, and this is something Delina taught me,
Yo,
my
yes.
wife. She said, when you're so worried about what people think about you, that is like the ultimate level of vanity.
It really is.
And I was like, damn, I've never thought about that before. I'm like, I don't, I'm not a vain person. So why should I care what other people think about me? And that's where culture comes back into play. Because if there is a culture that has been around blame and finger pointing, that can be transformed. It just
Yeah.
takes introspection, it takes reflection, and it requires a new way of looking at things. Because I know one of the things that you say is the devil is in the defaults.
So I want to circle back to one thing I said before because I'm thinking about it. And the accepting of the blame, like you can accept blame in the sense of like own it, like
Oh, it's
own it,
accountability, sure.
accountability. But I guess what I was trying to articulate is you don't have to take it personally. You don't have to let it emotionally affect you or drain you or bring you down. But by all means, ownership to me is such a well, it's one of our core values here.
Oh,
I just be able to own it.
you have to own it, but it doesn't mean it needs to bring you down. In fact, be coachable is also one of our values.
Yeah.
And that's where I think when we secret shopped our own website and we identified where we had gaps and blind spots, it was done for two reasons. It was done for I want to lead by example. I want
Yeah.
to say, hey, we are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. We have gaps, we have blind spots. We're always learning. And there comes that growth mindset. But I think in a culture of blame and finger pointing, that ends up in a culture where you have a fixed mindset. And I was talking to a VP of marketing this past week. And one of the things that they mentioned to me is they just did a workshop around growth mindset. And they were kind of lamenting the fact that they did a workshop around growth mindset. And I was like, well, why? And they were like, oh, it's a waste of time. And I'm like, sounds like you have a fixed mindset.
Yes. Yeah. I can see how people think that spending time on growth mindset and culture and it's just fluff and it's not that important. And oh my gosh, like, you know, I think there's sometimes this negative perception of like, not everything's just, rainbows and butterflies and let's hug each other and kumbaya. And so I do think that definitely might turn some people away from these kinds of conversations like growth mindset. And I know culture gets thrown around a lot as well. Um, but I don't know. I don't, it's a constant conversation that like growth, you don't have a growth mindset or you don't. Like a growth mindset is something that you do. It's not a you have it or you don't have it. It's a constant practice. And if you're not constantly talking about it and modeling it in your organization, you're going to get off track.
Well, growth mindset requires accountability. It requires ownership. It requires to say, hey, we can be even better. We can do even better. We can learn from an experience. An experience is not failure. And you're right. It is a constant ongoing. Back to your point of fluff, singing kumbaya. I will tell you this. So I was just doing a private workshop for an organization, for a marketing team, 7 people that has had a very challenging year. And when I walked into that room to kick things off, you could feel the energy. It was low. It was deflated. And so we walked through the what went well framework, and we just focused on wins for the first hour. Within an hour of just reflecting and surfacing the wins that this team had experienced over the last year, the energy level started to rise. And throughout the course of that day, by the time that we ended 5 hours later, that was a different team. Now, the executive of this team texted me. And one of the things that they had asked, they're like, listen, I know you read a lot. There is an admission of, I struggle with keeping a positive mindset. Do you have any books that you could recommend? And I don't know why, but top of my mind, and this is my Colby coming out, quick starting, two books came top of my mind. Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Because I think a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt is where a lot of blame and finger pointing comes from. So I said, read Outwitting the Devil. And then I said, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That is such a great, it's a little heavy.
It
Well,
is.
it's a lot. But talk about perception
Yes.
and a true testament to how much your mindset really does dictate your experience and your, I mean, well, in this case, survival.
Correct. But once again, while Man's Search for Meaning is such an extreme example of the survival mechanism and the role that mind and mindset does play into that, if you think about if an individual or a leader or a team for that matter is walking into work at their financial brand with the mindset of what do I have to do today to not get fired, that's a survival mechanism as well.
Yeah.
And when I was talking with the executive post workshop, the thing that they shared with me is they recently started doing therapy, which they have never done before. And they're like, this is helping me see things differently. It's a matter of reframing an experience. And that's a big part of our methodology. It's here's a website secret shopping study. Don't feel bad. Don't feel deflated. You're not a failure. Let's reframe this into a growth opportunity. And so this is it's a constant reframing, because if we can get beyond the blame and the finger pointing, if we can reconnect with curiosity, placing curiosity over criticism, that will lead to continuous growth. And I know there's some ancient wisdom here. It's 4 words. It comes down to courage. And those 4 words are this: fortune favors the bold. I mean, think about yourself. Because once again, we're looking at this from two different lenses. You're very empathetic to those who watch and listen. That's more of your natural MO. Coming back to the Colby profile, where does courage come into play with all of this?
I will say that the biggest leaps, growth leaps that I've had in my life, and I can look back and think of like specific moments where things shifted for me in a very big way. It was after I made a very bold move. And I never even thought about that until now. Like you saying that word bold, fortune favors the bold. And I'm thinking, wow, like, yes, it was a very bold moves that I had made. And most of this is career wise,
Yeah.
but definitely in my personal life as well. And you know that, but they were bold, scary, terrifying decisions where I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I wanted to see what the future held. That desire, whatever it was greater than where I was at. And I don't make a lot of risky decisions on a day to day basis. I am pretty bold. But when I do get to a point where I am done, living a certain way and being a certain way, I'm out because I can't stand this like complacently. I can't stand being miserable.
Fortune favors the bold.
Fortune favors the bold.
Courage is calling.
Courage is calling. Discipline is destiny.
They're all of these short anecdotes are all connected to continuing to level up. And if you are in a culture, if you have a culture of blame and criticism, finger pointing, I get it. You're going to end up in the cave of complacency. But that doesn't stop the world from passing you by. It doesn't stop consumer behavior from continuing to change.
Um,
And until you begin to transform your own personal belief systems and your belief structures, your behaviors your will not change. Your outcomes will not change. And that's one of the reasons it's like there are 4 steps that lead to human transformation. I wrote about in Banking on Change. You got to see different. You got to think different. But just because one sees and thinks different doesn't mean that they're going to move forward and make progress. It doesn't mean they're going to act different. It all comes down to the feeling,
yeah,
which is what we're talking about here today, once again.
it is. And I think one thing I actually, you and I were talking about this a little bit yesterday, but I think this works perfectly here and kind of in closing, as we close this conversation out, thinking about taking action and not taking action and being risk averse and asking yourself, if you're not making a change, if you're not taking action, why is it? Is it fear? And really start to be aware of what it is. So then that way you can decide, can you still make a bold move? If it is fear of being blamed, well, can you let that go, for a minute? And one of the Stoic phrases that I've just been reading about is premeditation malorium. And basically, look at the situation and think about all the different ways it could go wrong. Just think about it. Don't have go down like an anxious spiral thinking about it, but just say, okay, what's the worst that could happen if I do this or if I do that? And really think about it. And I would imagine, and many of those situations, like, is it really that bad? Is it something that you can address and move forward and grow because of? Think about it. Challenge yourself. What's the worst case scenario?
It's a great way, like you said, to wrap things up. And all transformation that leads to future growth, it just starts by telling the truth to yourself and to your team, to your organization about where you've been, about where you're at, and about where you could go next. and just be honest. Audrey, this has been a great conversation. And
That was fun.
and here's the fun fact is if you made it all the way to the end and you're like the, you know, you get the gold prize. We started recording, or at least we thought we started recording. And this guy right here thought he hit record.
Oh,
Other way, yeah. This guy right here thought he hit record. And we were maybe 10 or 15 minutes in.
yeah, this is take 2, everybody.
But it was, I take accountability. I take responsibility. There's no blame. And guess what? Guess what? This second go around was far better than where we were kicking things off.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's another way of looking at
Yeah.
everything
We didn't talk
happens.
about it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Everything happens for a reason. Because you and I
Yeah.
could have sat here and bitched about, oh, we have to do this thing again. And then, oh, we lost 15, 20 minutes. You know what? I said, Audrey, I am sorry. I thought I hit record. It was not recording. Because see, it's a follow through. I mean, there's Colby that plays into this again. I thought I hit it, did not hit it. I apologize. You said no big deal. We'll start over. And I'm so glad that it happened the way that it did. No finger pointing, no blaming.
No. No
and
bitching.
It all worked out. It all worked out for the better. So thank you for making this a real practical use case for those that got to this point. This has been a lot of fun, Audrey.
Good conversation.
It is a very good conversation.
And thank you for joining us for another episode of the Banking on Digital Growth podcast.